Well, for more on Japan's economy and one of its key drivers, I'm joined by Kay Shimizu, a political science research assistant professor from the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So as we heard there, 7 straight quarters of growth. What are the factors behind Japan's economic success?
Well, as you just mentioned, there's been strong growth in exports, and that's basically supporting the foundations of that growth, coupled by growing capital investments that have long been the combination of which has been the strength of the Japanese economy in the past several quarters. It's also seen near full employment now, and that also supports a strong growth, economic growth. And there's still some upward mobility because that strong employment numbers means that consumers, even though they have been slow to catch up with the rest of the economy, consumers can be a new source of growth in terms of their expenditures as well.
And speaking of consumers, we did see that domestic consumption fell for the first time since 2015. We also have inflation that's still below the government's 2% target. So overall, what would you say is really holding the Japanese economy back?
Well, there are other factors that are still holding the Japanese economy back, and really inflation has been slow to grow. Consumers have been very wary of Japan's economic growth, even though there's been modest growth for more than 7 quarters now. And so consumers really need some confidence in the economy to know that they can continue and also increase their expenditures as employment numbers improve and they see real changes in their pockets as wages slowly start to rise.
And of course, people love to spend on cars. So how large of a role does Japan's auto industry play in Japan's overall economy?
Oh, Japanese automakers are really one of the core industries of the Japanese economy ever since the 70s and 80s, and as it peaked into the 1990s. But of course, now Japan's automakers face many, many challenges from especially its European and US counterparts.
So then, compared to its global competitors, how would you describe the current health of the Japanese auto industry?
Well, Japanese auto industry now really is being challenged by its European and US counterparts, especially in terms of artificial intelligence, electric cars, these new cutting-edge technologies that are really changing the industry. It's no secret that Japan's many industries, including automobiles, have been very risk-averse in the past. And I believe that the large automakers could perhaps be characterized as such. That's not to say that they are not very aware of what the new technology and new markets are. And certainly the largest companies like Toyota, Honda, Nissan are racing to catch up and even surpass those technologies that are being developed in places like Silicon Valley.
So in terms of the risk that Japanese car makers take by really kind of taking the back foot when it comes to technology, you also have these tech companies increasingly expanding into this space. So what does the competition look like right now?
Well, the competition for automobiles may not necessarily be the traditional companies. We know that, for example, the electric car company Tesla is in consideration of having manufacturing go on in neighboring Shanghai. But one of the components to that, the major component, the batteries, are in fact made by Japanese companies like Panasonic. And so, although in the past, Japanese automakers were competing with US and European automakers, now their new competition with new automakers and also new components makers that may be the actual new competitors that are coming onto this stage.
Now, looking at the US market, we know that US President Donald Trump is asking Japanese car makers to make their cars in the US. What are the odds of that actually happening?
Actually, that was a really interesting comment by President Trump. I'm not really sure how much aware he is that major car companies, Japanese car companies, are in fact already manufacturing here in the United States. Toyota alone employs close to 30,000 people, and as do Honda and Nissan and other companies. So tens of thousands of US workers are already being employed in car manufacturing factories here in the US.
And so which other markets would you say that Japanese car makers are looking to really capitalize on?
Well, it's a strong record of being very attentive to consumer needs and safety needs in particular, I think are the ones that the two characteristics that Japanese automakers are in particularly wanting to be competitive on. That said, the cutting edge technologies of artificial intelligence and electric cars, those types of technologies really need to be pursued by these automakers if they are to remain competitive on the global market.
All right, thank you so much, Kay Shimizu, Research Assistant Professor of Political Science at the University of Pittsburgh.